If you're fascinated by the medieval past but find the Carolingians just a little too centered on Charlemagne, or if you've ever wanted a book that explains how a mighty empire can dissolve because of pride and bad politics and just a dysfunctional family, then today's book just might be for you. Today I'll be reviewing Oathbreakers, the War of Brothers that Shattered an Empire and Made Medieval Europe by Matthew Gabriele and David M. Perry. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan. And today we're taking a look at another medieval history book. Oathbreakers actually opens with a dramatic moment in 833 when Emperor Louis the Pious, Charlemagne's only surviving legitimate son, is humiliated and deposed by his own sons. He is forced to perform a public penance, he is stripped of his imperial title, and symbolically shamed in front of the same empire he once ruled. The authors frame this event as a turning point in the unraveling of the Carolingian order and setting the stage for a story not of heroic kingship, but of betrayal and succession crisis and the limitations of dynastic rule, especially dynastic rule that simply hasn't been well formulated just yet. The book then backtracks to explore how the empire got there. Charlemagne is, of course, part of the story, but he's actually not the main character, something I really appreciated. Instead, Gabriele and Perry focus on his heirs, Louis the Pious, and then Louis's sons Lothar, Louis the German, Charles the Bald, and the ill-fated Pippin, among others. Louis the Pious tried to hold things together after his father's death in 814. He inherited a vast but fragile empire that spanned modern-day France, Germany, Italy, and even more. Charlemagne had united it through military might, as well as administrative reforms and religious legitimacy, often relying on a shared Christian identity as the glue that bound it all. But there was no blueprint for succession, at least not one that worked anyway. Louis wanted unity, but he also wanted peace with his sons, and he kept revising the imperial inheritance to accommodate new sons and new political pressures. Those revisions bred resentment. His sons fought not only for their share of the empire, but also to assert legitimacy. Lothar, as the eldest, claimed primacy, but his brothers chafed under his rule. Charles the Bald, the youngest and a child of Louis's second marriage, was seen by many as a usurper. Alliances shifted constantly. Sometimes sons ganged up on their father and other times on each other. The book's title, Oathbreakers, reflects this chaotic landscape. Oaths of loyalty were constantly made and broken. Even bishops and abbots, the moral backbone of the Carolingian Empire, were pulled into these conflicts, often legitimizing one brother over another, then reversing course when fortunes changed. The empire at this point was held together by a shared identity, a shared history, and a lot of hope, but not much structure. Gabriele and Perry skillfully show how these familial rivalries culminated in open war. The climactic moment comes in 843 with the Treaty of Verdun, where the empire is divided into three parts: West Francia, which is controlled by Charles; East Francia, which is controlled by Louis the German; and Middle Francia, which is controlled by Lothar. And this division didn't just break up the Carolingian Empire, it helped create the cultural geographic foundations for modern-day France and Germany. The authors don't treat this as a neat conclusion. Instead, they stress how messy and tragic and deeply human this fragmentation was. The empire didn't fall because of barbarians or an external threat. It splintered from within because of flawed people making short-sighted decisions under pressure. And while these events happened over a millennium ago, the dynamics feel strikingly familiar. Power struggles, fragile institutions, bad faith politics, and a whole lot of ego. As a medievalist, I read Oathbreakers more out of professional interest than expectation. It's about a century earlier than my usual focus, but I ended up really enjoying it, in large part because it makes the Carolingians interesting in a way that's approachable and well-paced. That's something that Gabriele and Perry also did in the Bright Ages, and it's part of their ongoing project to bring medieval history out of the shadows of dusty academia and into some public conversation. Is the book full of groundbreaking new theories? Not really, but that's not the point. What it does, and I would argue very effectively, is it tells the story of this empire's collapse without getting bogged down in jargon or overly narrow scholarly debates. It's accessible yet intelligent, and maybe most importantly, it doesn't treat Charlemagne like a god king. In fact, it makes a pretty compelling case that for all his greatness, Charlemagne left his sons a time bomb, and they certainly lit the fuse. Despite my usual resistance to great man history, Oathbreakers reminds us that incompetent men can absolutely undo generations of work. The Carolingians weren't doomed by fate, they were undone by bad decisions and frayed loyalties and repeated failures to think long term. So who is this book for? Fans of medieval history, especially those curious about the Carolingians, will certainly enjoy this. Readers of the Bright Ages looking for a deeper dive into a post-Charlemagne Europe would certainly enjoy this book as well. Professors, students, or history buffs who want a smart but readable political history, I think will all enjoy this. Anyone interested in dynastic collapse or the fraternal rivalries or the church-state tension, I think you will also enjoy this book. Who is this book not for? Well, readers looking for a Charlemagne-centered biography. And when you talk about the Carolingians, it's understandable that is the person you would be most interested in. But I also think it's great for us to think just a little downriver than Charlemagne and to consider the consequences of his heirs on this empire that he built. Also, people who want new archival discoveries or groundbreaking academic claims, you're not going to find that here, but that's okay. I don't think all books don't have to be groundbreaking in an argument they're making. Simply telling an important story well, in my opinion, can also be considered groundbreaking. Readers that are uninterested in political or dynastic history probably will not enjoy this. There's a lot of that going on here. And anyone hoping for a sweeping or a romanticized portrait of medieval kingship definitely is not going to find that here either. So all in all, I'd say Oathbreakers is a sharp and readable and a refreshingly human take on how an empire can crumble from within. And if you're like me and the Carolingians aren't your usual medieval gem, this might be the book that changes that. If you've read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.